apocalypse. When an entire people are destroyed or destroy themselves. The end of civilization. For us today, as we go about our daily lives, it's barely something we consider. We're so sure it couldn't happen to us. But for some civilizations, it already has. The remnants of great kingdoms, empires, civilizations span the globe. The old Egyptian kingdom, the Roman Empire, the Sumerians. Drought, conflict, collapse. We know the story of their rise and also their fall. But one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen still holds mysteries for archaeologists. The Maya civilization. For nearly 3,000 years, the Maya thrived in the rainforests of Central America. Their civilization evolved, not as a centralized empire, but a series of rival city-states, all with common languages, religion, and architecture. At its peak, in 500 CE, great stone cities covered the Yucatan Peninsula. Their heartland was in the southern lowlands of Guatemala.
The Maya civilization just explodes. You have more buildings being made, the cities are getting larger, the art is getting more intricate. They have sport, they have stadia. They are able to make observations and chart perfectly the movement of the stars.
They had developed an understanding of science and mathematics that far exceeded the Western world's at the time.
Their astronomy and mathematics were incredible. They have one monument, and the entire back of it is covered with hieroglyphs. It's a giant mathematical table, multiplying into the billions.
At the heart of each Maya city was a divine king, a holy lord, who they believed could communicate with the ancestors and the gods, guaranteeing their people's survival. An offering of their own blood and the blood of others in the form of human sacrifice ensured this. The civilization reached a spectacular height. But by 900 CE, their great cities are abandoned, and the Maya people all but disappear. We ask the question, what happened to the Maya civilization? Europeans first encountered the people of Central America in the early 16th century. By 1519, Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, began their colonization of this new world. They were driven by its promise of great mineral wealth, but they also found a people ripe for conversion to Christianity.
The Spanish conquistadors were driven by two things. One was gold, no question about it. And the other was that they were extremely religious, Catholic, and they wanted to spread the word of God and the Catholic Church.
Along the edges of the Yucatan Peninsula, they encountered a disparate, small population of indigenous people known as the Maya. The conquistadors were fanatical in the way they delivered the Bible's message.
Bishop Diego de Lada was incredibly vicious in the way that he perpetrated his religion on the people. He tortured them. He burnt their books. They had wonderful books made of deerskin and tree bark that they used to write down their local myths.
He needed to destroy the culture that was in the way of them seeing the true way to Christ. Originally, there would have been thousands of these bark paper books, And he gathered up all the bark paper books that he could, and he burned them in a massive bonfire.
But the Spanish found it a lot harder destroying the ruins of the massive stone cities they found across the Yucatan. As the centuries passed and the jungles were explored, more and more of these mysterious stone cities were reported. By the early 19th century, the first widely read account of these discoveries reached Europe. Spanish author Antonio del Rio's report creates a sensation. It describes abandoned cities, overgrown and hidden by vegetation throughout Central America. Among those who read it are the amateur archaeologists and explorers John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood. They are mesmerized by stories of a lost world consumed by the rainforest. Who built these stone monuments, reclaimed by the jungle? Why were they abandoned? To the archaeological establishment, it seemed impossible that the indigenous people of the region, known as the Maya, could be responsible.
The establishment at the time saw these pyramids, and they saw these things which looked a lot like hieroglyphs. And they thought, could this be made by the ancient Egyptians, or maybe it was the Phoenicians? It couldn't have been the local people.
Stephens and Catherwood are dumbstruck by the establishment's view.
They knew that they couldn't possibly be anything else other than a native Central American civilization.
For them, it's clear these ruins are the remnants of an ancient Mesoamerican civilization. They set out to prove their theory. But why have they been left to the jungle? Could they find any evidence for why these cities had been abandoned?
Stephens and Catherwood, armed only with a few descriptions, decide to go down and find these lost cities in the middle of the rainforest.
Central America was in the midst of civil war. It was extremely dangerous. There was bandits. It was wild. Stephens and Catherwood were armed to the teeth.
Their mission begins in Honduras, at the base of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Each of them had 2 pistols, swords. I mean, they were prepared. This was dangerous ground.
And they would soon discover just how dangerous a civil war could be for foreign travelers.
They were a little bit naive in thinking, we'll just make our way through it and keep out of the way and just go about our business.
But while sheltering in an abandoned church, drunken soldiers make it their business.
And they were taken hostage and held overnight under arrest in very dicey circumstances that they didn't know they were going to get out of.
The following morning, the soldiers sober up, and Stephens and Catherwood are set free to continue on their journey. But now, their greatest threat isn't the Civil War, but the terrain of Central America.
I don't know if you've seen the mountains in this region, but they are near cliffs. And these guys were trekking through the heat, the rain, the insects, the discomfort.
But Stephens and Catherwood finally locate their first stone ruins near the Honduran town of Copan. The two waste no time. They employ local tribesmen to clear the dense vegetation. And as the forest is cut back, they realize their adventure was worth the hardship.
The illustrations they had seen were nothing like what they found. It was electrifying. It took their breath away. They found monuments, pyramids, temples, and houses made of stone. It was a revelation. It was astounding.
And as Stephens and Catherwood continue their journey, it becomes clear this first site isn't unique. Hidden beneath the rainforest, they uncover stone city after stone city. The scale of construction is breathtaking. And across the sites, they uncover intricate carvings, what looks to them like hieroglyphs.
This is an entire civilization, all sharing common iconography. And not only that, they realise that none of this iconography is similar to anything they've seen before. Yes, it might be hieroglyphs, but it's not anything like, the Egyptian hieroglyphs. This is brand new, and this must come from the Mesoamericans themselves.
They cut, climb, and scrape their way through nearly 5,000 kilometers of rainforest and uncover some of the greatest Maya cities ever built. From Copan and Palenque in the south, to Tulum, Uxmal, and Chichen Itza in the north of the Yucatan Peninsula. In total, they identify 44 Maya sites, and the similarities in architecture, art, and the carved glyphs between the separate cities show it's the work of a single people, the Maya civilization. When they publish, their work creates a sensation.
The books were bestsellers. Stevens is a brilliant author. And the illustrations, of course, just struck the popular mind. It was a sensation. They were the archaeological celebrities of their day.
But their findings ask more questions than they answer. What had happened to these people? What could cause the collapse of an entire civilization? And when did it happen? If the early archaeologists could find a way to date the Maya civilization, they might be able to work out when it collapsed. There could be clues in the Maya glyphs found carved into stone across the civilization. The problem was, no one could read them. The task of decoding the glyphs is made even harder by the actions of fanatical Spanish conquistadors centuries earlier. Invaluable secrets to unlocking the Maya writing system went up in flames when their books were burnt. The early archaeologists trying to decode the Maya glyphs are forced to start from scratch. Almost. Some copies of their books did still survive. Could they help unlock the mystery of the glyphs?
The archaeological world is incredibly lucky that Ernst Forstermann worked at the Dresden Library.
The Royal Dresden Library held one of only 4 Maya books that had been spared from the Spanish flames. It's known as the Dresden Codex.
When Forstermann began work on the Dresden Codex, he was already building on the scholarship of others. They already knew that the Dresden Codex dealt with the Maya view of astronomy and their calendar.
But just how? No one was sure. With much of their writing system indecipherable, decoding their calendar could be the crucial first step to understanding when the Maya lived and when they collapsed. Forstermann takes up the challenge.
Forstermann worked out that some of the glyphs were representing numbers, and they weren't just mathematical counting, they were actually dates.
As a mathematician, Forstermann realized that Maya dates were counted as just 5 numbers, separated by dots.
Now this measures really huge periods of time. The right-handmost number is what the Maya call a ki'in and shows days. The next one in is a winal, and that represents a period of 20 days. The next one in is a ton, and that counts years, and the next one in is a katon, which are blocks of 20 years. The next one in, the 5th, is a bakton, 20 periods of 20 years each, which is 144,000 days.
Or a little less than 400 years when it started again. It was a breakthrough. Archaeologists finally understood not only how the Maya counted time, but also how to date their history.
In the Dresden Codex, they had marked down the dates of the occurrence of a solar eclipse.
And the historical occurrence of a solar eclipse is something astronomers can calculate using our own calendar.
If you can find that date and the Maya date for the eclipse, you can sync the two.
And astronomers found a match. A solar eclipse recorded in the Dresden Codex on the 16th of July, 790 CE. The Maya calendar and our own were synchronized. Archaeologists began seeing dates chiseled into stone at sites across the Maya world.
Dates were carved on the sides of monuments, on the sides of temples. They were absolutely everywhere.
Now that archaeologists could read the Maya dates, they turned their attention to their writing system. And one particular kind of carved monument captured their attention.
Archaeologists had long suspected that the stelae, the stone tablets that had been erected outside temples, represented some kind of history of gods or kings, some kind of important figures.
Could the Maya have recorded any clues for what caused their demise? The problem was that although the Maya calendar had been decoded, this was only a small portion of their writing system. The vast majority of their glyphs still remained indecipherable.
If they could just break this code, then they could understand so much about what the people who built these cities found so important that they'd carve it into stone.
For over 100 years, archaeologists were trying to fully decipher the Maya glyphs. Over 800 individual glyphs were identified, and researchers suspected the writing system was logosyllabic, a mixture of logograms, where a symbol represents a separate word, and syllabograms, where each symbol represents spoken sounds and are combined to enunciate whole words. But with so many individual glyphs, the system was too complex. The Maya code remained indecipherable. Until, in the 1980s, 15-year-old David Stewart took up the challenge. After centuries of failure, what chance did a schoolboy have?
As a child, he'd grown up exploring Mesoamerican ruins because his father worked for the National Geographic Society. And when new temple complexes were discovered, this kid, David, would sit down with his crayons and his sketchbook and draw the glyphs too. And it meant that he had as in-depth an understanding of the Maya writing systems as all the experts in the world did.
But like the experts before him, Stewart couldn't get past the complexity of the language. With over 800 individual symbols, there were too many for each one to represent a spoken syllable. But the sheer number of glyphs gives the teenager a clue.
David Stewart realized that the symbols didn't each represent a different syllable. There were multiple symbols that would represent the same syllable.
There weren't 800 individual syllables in the Maya language, just variations for writing each one. Words could be depicted using many different forms, and individual syllables written multiple ways. The Maya code was cracked, and as archaeologists began to translate the stelae, they were blown away.
They showed birth dates, they showed accession dates, they showed important victories and terrible defeats, and when the throne was passed on to the next king. In those tablets of stone, we have the history of ancient Maya.
Archaeologists could finally read the Maya story, and what they discovered was astonishing. In the rainforests of Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, the Maya people thrived for nearly 3,000 years. As early as 2000 BCE, civilizations began to emerge in Central America. First the Olmecs, and then the Teotihuacan of Mexico. Their traditions shaped Maya culture. In roughly 250 CE, the Maya developed into the civilization we know today. almost 1,000 years before the Aztecs further north in Mexico and the great Inca Empire in South America. But it's from 500 CE, in the southern lowland region of Guatemala, that the Maya truly reached their stride. It's a civilization to rival any, but by 900 CE, at their very height, the Maya abandoned their heartland. Remnants of the people survived along the edges of the Yucatan. These are the people the conquistadors first encountered in the 16th century. But their civilization is a shadow of its former self, and over the centuries, the cause of their exodus from the southern lowlands is forgotten.
Studying them is really kind of like the early autopsies to understand the body. It's in ruins in the jungle, what happened.
It's one of the greatest cold cases in history. What caused the collapse of the Maya civilization? But among the ruins, surely the Maya must have left some clues. Deep in the Guatemala rainforest, along the Pasión River, archaeologists uncover something disturbing. At Maya cities, all along this river, they find human bones.
A vast majority of the samples showed evidence of a particular bone deformity, particularly in the skull, called porotic hyperostosis. What you end up with is skulls that kind of look like sponges, but they're thick, they're deformed. Deformities in the bones like this, it's clear these people were not healthy.
As more deformed bones were discovered in adjacent towns, it became clear they were distributed along the Pasión River. Archaeologists need to know what was causing the deformations. They enlist the help of paleopathologist Frank Saul.
The conclusions that Saul and his team came to in the 70s was that the deformities in these bones along the Pasión River were evidence of malnutrition. These people had starved.
Malnutrition suggested that the Maya food chain collapsed. Given that rainforests are notoriously difficult to farm, in many ways, over-farming made sense.
Typically, tropical rainforest soils aren't nutrient-rich. They can be exhausted very quickly.
It's really hard to sustain a large population in a rainforest where you've got thin soils, where you have to constantly maintain this delicate balance between the nutrients going into the soil and the nutrients coming out of the soil through your harvesting.
The idea that the Maya population outstripped their capacity to grow food was tantalizing, particularly with the form of agriculture that archaeologists consider the Maya used: slash and burn, clearing the forest and setting it alight.
In slash and burn farming, for every 3 years or so of growing, you then need 15 years of the field to lay fallow for it to recharge its nutrients again. If you just keep growing and growing and growing without waiting 10 or 15 years for the soil to replenish itself, the food will just stop growing.
Did the Maya population outgrow the land? Archaeologists needed a way to understand the true scale of their civilization. For centuries, archaeologists surveyed from the ground. In the rainforest, it's painstakingly slow. But then a revolutionary piece of aerial technology, LiDAR, transformed archaeology overnight.
LiDAR sends down hundreds of thousands of laser beams to the surface of the Earth, and it measures the speed of the laser beam bouncing back and returning. And so by measuring the distance, you can calibrate those data points and build a 3D model of what the shape of the land surface is. The amazing thing about LiDAR is that the light ray will penetrate right to the surface, even through dense tree cover. So you can start to build an incredibly detailed picture of the land surface hidden deep under that vegetation. If you suddenly see a straight line, you know that probably that isn't Mother Nature, that's the hand of humans. You're looking for the things that stand out, the anomalies, and those are the points to investigate.
And when LiDAR recorded the areas around known Maya sites, the results were astonishing. Out of nowhere, over 60,000 unknown Maya structures suddenly appeared.
What the LiDAR revealed to us wasn't that the Mayans lived in little cities surrounded by jungle, but actually all of these cities were networked. This is massive infrastructure. This is one of the most significant civilizations that humanity has ever seen.
Crucially, LiDAR revealed the true extent of the Maya world.
Tikal is one of the greatest ancient Maya cities. It's been studied for more than 100 years by archaeologists, and to be honest, we thought we knew quite a lot. But then they sent up the LiDAR surveyors, and it was an absolute game changer.
Scans of Tikal showed the city was 4 times larger than previously thought. LiDAR analysis has forced archaeologists to radically rethink the size of the Maya population.
There was an estimate of about 5 million people, but the estimate has now been raised to about 15 million people.
The Maya civilization at this time was one of the largest and most awe-inspiring on Earth.
This forces us to go back and recalculate what's called landscape carrying capacity. How many people could a given landscape support?
Surely, it would be impossible for the nutrient-poor rainforest soil to sustain that level of population. Did their agriculture simply give out on them? Just as archaeologists thought they had solved the mystery of the sudden Maya collapse, LiDAR analysis threw everything on its head. The Maya were spectacularly advanced farmers. They understood the limitations of agriculture in a rainforest and engineered the natural environment to maximize their farming yield.
LiDAR techniques have forced us to re-evaluate the scale of Maya ambition in terms of engineering their environment. So much of the landscape was managed for agricultural output. They irrigated large raised and terraced fields so that they could retain as much of the soil as possible, preventing runoff from water, preventing erosion, helping that vegetative matter stay in the soil so that it maintains its ability to grow crops well. There are these areas that are swampy. In Spanish, the word is bajo, and in these swampy areas, you get a lot of vegetation that rots down very slowly and it stays that gloopy, thick, dark, rich organic matter. Now, yeah, it stinks. You don't necessarily want to fall in one, but if you dump that stuff onto your field, it's incredible fertilizer. These are farmers who understand their place in the system in order to maximize the agricultural output of these landscapes.
The Maya were masters of farming in the typically difficult rainforest environment. Cultivating the land gave them a more dependable harvest and a food surplus. And this allowed the Maya culture to flourish, provided the climate remains stable.
They had learned how to walk this tightrope. They had learned how to reach this delicate balance between not overexploiting, but exploiting enough to feed everybody. They were amazing experts at cultivating this rainforest.
And there was something else missing, written evidence of famine. But did the Maya leave any clues for the cause of their collapse in their glyphs? Dr. Arthur Demarest's team excavate at Dos Pilas, a Maya ruin near the Pasión River.
At the site of Dos Pilas is a staircase, and it's absolutely covered in glyphs. And the story the glyphs tell is one of war. All out, bloody, vengeful war. Could this have been the war to end all wars?
The glyphs offer a tantalizing breakthrough behind the Maya collapse. Could one Maya group have wiped all others out? But the translators have a problem. The glyphs seem incomplete. Part of the story is missing. The dig goes from bad to worse.
Excavations at the site were halted because of the hurricane season, and the excavators got a call saying that there'd been great destruction and lots of damage at the site. But one of the things that happened was that it revealed more hieroglyphs on the Dos Pilas staircase, and this transformed everything.
The hurricanes exposed 10 previously undiscovered stairs, covered in glyphs, the missing part of the story. The archaeologists could finally read the complete sequence. It was the history of Dos Pilas, and it was steeped in warfare. Did the Maya destroy each other? As Demarest's team translated the glyphs, they discovered a detailed story. In the 600 CE, two superpowers wage war, Tikal and Calakmul.
Tikal rises to ascendancy and has overlordship of a huge area and lots of other very rich and well-endowed city-states. In the 620s, one of the sons of the divine dynasty is sent to an outpost on the Pasión River to establish a new city. We know it as Dos Pilas. And it was important as a sort of defensive military outpost, basically to ward off potential would-be attackers because they could see that there was control across the whole area.
But Calakmul wasn't deterred, and Dos Pilas was captured and subjugated. Analysis of the glyphs showed Dos Pilas pledged allegiance to Calakmul and fought with them. This war didn't end in total destruction. It ended in assimilation.
In most cases, they would put somebody else on the throne, or often the same king. But now, they're paying tribute to the other great city.
Rival cities and their people were subjugated. It's evidence that the result of Maya conflict was an expansion of influence, not a collapse. Maya civilization was warlike, but they managed to coexist. The cause of their apocalypse is a bigger mystery than ever. Archaeologists return to the pattern of collapse to see if they had somehow overlooked a clue. The collapse of the Maya cities along the Pasión River start with Dos Pilas. Then, all along the Yucatan Peninsula, Maya cities fall like dominoes. The answer had to lie in this very specific region. Dr. Demarest and his team are excavating at Conquén, a Maya township located where the Pasión River meets Guatemala's volcanic mountains.
The city of Conquén was a small kingdom under Dos Pilas. We have there the largest jade workshop in the Americas. So the city was very important.
Here, the archaeologists make a gruesome discovery.
There's a little pool, natural little water hole. So they started digging a little hole, and then it was bigger and bigger, and then they started finding bones, more bones, more bones. There were 31 bodies.
Archaeologists know from Maya glyphs that in times of great crisis, human sacrifices were made. Is this what happened here? Luckily, the Maya left behind a great deal of information about the macabre ritual.
When Maya were sacrificed, they would be brought to the top of a pyramid. They would be painted in blue, decapitated. Their heart would be ripped out. So it leaves a fairly recognizable fingerprint in the archaeological record.
Were the bodies in the Conquen pit human sacrifices? Dr. Demarest's team enlists the help of the Forensic Foundation of Guatemala, forensic pathologists who usually investigate war crimes. They established that their killing wasn't in keeping with sacrificial practice.
They had jade implants in their teeth. And then you had, jaguar claw necklaces and some canines. Clearly, these were not just, warriors or something. They were high elite. They could see that some were speared, a couple were bashed in the head. Several had a spear thrust through the throat, severing the spinal cord.
The autopsies make sacrifice unlikely. So why were these people killed? They find another clue in Conquen.
The palaces, parts are toppled. Hundreds of tons of dirt and garbage are buried over the throne rooms and the surfaces. We're digging, we're seeing this, and wow, this is really the mother lode, for collapse.
They date the destruction to 800 CE. Whatever happened at Conquen happened near the start of the Maya collapse. Everything pointed to the deaths being linked with a distinct Maya form of worship. Could it offer clues for the cause of their collapse?
There is almost nothing in the Maya culture which isn't a religious ceremony. They had a holy lord at the top who's effectively a king, and he gets his power because he is descended from the gods. He could talk with the gods, he can convene with the gods.
They had many, many different gods for different things. Corn god, a rain god. It was crucial for the Maya people, the common people, that the gods were placated. This meant life and death because the agricultural base of their society was very much dependent on rain.
To appease the gods, the Holy Lords would honor them with an elaborate ceremony.
They put on pageants before the people. They loved red, and they painted their pyramids and their temples in these vivid colors.
The king would go up these giant stairways carrying 200 pounds of headdresses and jade.
Jade was one of their most significant jewels. The very noble, the very religious, obviously the holy ruler would have had a lot of objects involving jade as a way to communicate with the gods.
Once they had the attention of the gods, they opened up a unique line of communication.
Blood was a way of communicating with the gods. The Holy Lord would cut part of his body, often his genitalia, and drain his blood. Pieces of paper or parchment would be used to soak up the blood. He would then burn that blood and inhale the smoke. Now, this was meant to conjure a sort of intermediary to gods, a serpent, who would then go and talk to the gods on behalf of the holy ruler and his people.
The visions would advise them on all aspects of Maya life, but crucially, when to plant and harvest their crops. And for the Maya, the city that pleased the gods best reaped the greatest rewards.
You have this competition between the holy lords of one city and another. This is called status robbery, but also construction, pyramid building, and then you have to do it more, and rituals, they have to be bigger, which requires bigger and bigger stages. And there are many cities in the Maya, very intense competition.
And there is evidence that in 796 CE, the Holy Lord of Conquen was riding high at the epicenter of Maya trade. In the Holy Lord's palace, Dr. Demarest's team have uncovered a sculpture. It shows the Holy Lord sitting astride a Maya water monster.
This was symbolizing that he was the king of the river. The rainforest is hell to move through. Rivers were the big highways. The Passion River is the biggest river, and it flows from the volcanic mountains all the way through to Mexico. Jade was coming back. Jade was necessary for the kings. It's like very, very powerful, significant in terms of your social status.
By 796, the Holy Lord and his elites had grown wealthy from the jade trade. But just 4 years later, the city was abandoned. It's a pattern repeated across the Maya civilization. A city reaches the height of power and then collapses. They returned to the 31 bodies thrown in the pit. Understanding why they were killed could be key, and one very striking feature provided a clue. The victims were buried still wearing their luxury items. These were the remains of the Holy Lord and his nobles.
It seemed very strange to us, but it wasn't some angry, massacre. It's not invaders. It's not people from a distance. It's not war.
If they were killed by invaders, their bodies would have been looted. The Holy Lords of Conquen were killed, and their shrines desecrated by their own people. But what triggered this sudden act of violence? Archaeologists look downriver to Dos Pilas, the regional powerhouse and rulers of Conquen.
It's a very strange city because it was founded for war. But then when the wars were over, it became more controlling the trade route, the jade. But it ended up conquering much of the Passion River. The conquest didn't mean that they took over these cities in detail. It did mean they paid tribute, and it led to a period of great wealth in Dos Pilas.
But although financially Dos Pilas was thriving, there were signs that the city had turned its back on its religious rites.
They were at their height in 760. In 761, they tore down a lot of their temples and palaces to build defensive walls. There was obviously a coming attack.
But from who? Archaeologists look to vassal cities under the control of Dos Pilas. They strike gold in the ruins of Tamarandito.
When archaeologists began deciphering the stele from Tamarandito, what they found was that the king of Tamarandito had decided to rise up and overthrow his oppressor at Dos Pilas.
With Tamarandito advancing, Dos Pilas prepared for a siege.
We dug 13 kilometers of walls. And we found right by where the wall was breached in the center part of the city, 13 decapitated adult male skulls, young adult warriors, in other words, in a pit there.
By 761 CE, the elites of Dos Pilas were dead and the city abandoned. But the fighting didn't stop here.
When Dos Pilas was destroyed, then you start to see others fall. There's a rapid domino effect. The population drop was very dramatic, very fast.
It seems there was a rebellion that spread throughout the southern lowland region, the heartland of the Maya civilization. So what caused the Maya to revolt against the ruling elite of their cities?
We will never completely be able to know the individual ways in which this city collapsed or that city collapsed, but that's not that important. What's important is to see the connections and then see the real causes underneath. The system of divine kingship and the status rivalry. You see all these things, more and more monuments because you have more nobles and the kings need more jade, need to have more power. And you see those things getting greater and greater. And it really is greater in many ways, but not for everybody. The degree of social inequality created is hard to sustain.
Dr. Arthur Demarest believes the system of divine leadership, placing all their faith in the ruling elite, is key to the collapse.
Over time, the differences in social strata, the stratification between the poor and the nobles and the rulers became greater and greater and greater. And then this wonderful construction and the beautiful science, everything we see, the energy for that being produced by the farmers below, you begin to see the health of the farming class deteriorating. 95% of the population were farmers.
Status rivalry between city-states pushed the Maya people to breaking point, and things were only going to get worse. In 800 CE, the Yucatan was hit by a severe drought. It lasted for 150 years. The Maya civilization reached the heights it did because they mastered farming in the typically difficult rainforest environment. The drought threatened to destroy everything, and the Maya solution to the drought would prove just as fatal.
Whenever there was a disaster, whenever there was a drought and the Holy Lord was unable to convince the gods to give them rain, well, what did they do? They doubled down. They'd be focusing on building more temples to the gods, building more monuments. A city would declare war on another city, going out and finding more jade. And at a time, if your people are starving and you're going out and spending a lot of time trying to get jade, it seems really backwards.
The Maya went to war to control what little resources there were left, built more temples, held more ceremonies, and prayed harder, hoping the gods would save them. Their efforts proved futile.
What happens when the Holy Lord is unable to convince the gods to make it rain? Maybe you realize that the system's not working. And if the system's not working, what do humans tend to do? Well, they tend to smash it up and leave.
It's believed that one by one, they gave up on their holy lords, like the people of Conquén had, ritually killed them and abandoned their cities. What happened to the Maya, compared to other civilizations, was severe. From its height, the Roman Empire took over 350 years to collapse. And their response to their problems are very different to the Mayas.
The leaders of the Roman Empire were fundamentally incredibly pragmatic. Different versions of political leadership were trialed in order to prevent civil war from breaking out. Various emperors delineated the edges of the empire and said, this is as far as we can go in order to not destroy ourselves back home. The thing about the Romans is that they tried stuff out in order to try and keep things together. From what we know of the history of the Maya, they didn't do that.
The Maya people themselves aren't gone. Their descendants live on in the Yucatan, even today. But it's thought that at the height of the collapse, the ancient Maya abandoned their cities and dispersed into the rainforest, reorganizing into smaller, self-sufficient villages. By 900 CE, the collapse in the Maya heartland had all but stopped, and only Maya in the Yucatan and highlands remained. The Maya's great temples, their palaces, their cities were left for the rainforest.